Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it is here, it is time. This is the place. What better place than here? What better time than now? Happy Mother's Day to all of you out there who have a mother and choose this day to celebrate her. I, of course, give thanks to my own mother who gave me life, but more so look at my wife, who is an absolutely incredible mother to our only daughter, neither of whom have had the easiest path through life in the last decade plus, but my daughter's continued improvement and happiness is the greatest thing in my life and absolutely would not be possible without the constant industry effort and just all-around brilliance of her mother, my wife. So big shout out to her. Could not do this or any of the other things I get to do without her constant support. And incredible work as a mom. So hope those of you out there who have not yet, at the very least, sent the text message, if not the flowers, make sure to come up with time to do so over the next couple of hours. 2 games today. Oddly, we have our West Coast teams going on early and our East Coast teams going on late, bringing a little circadian rhythm madness into things, but everyone has had a couple days off. And I suppose that's the first thing I should mention. We should see starters pressing for really impressive minute totals in these games as a generality, speaking about them. So it depends, team by team, how likely they have been to squeeze out their bench guys. But definitely something you should be looking at going forward. And by going forward, I mean today, is exactly how much time these bench players will be getting in this situation. Makes it a bit of a tricky quantity to figure out, and again, does vary a bit team to team, so we'll discuss it specifically as it applies to each team, but certainly something should be considered that you will see extra minutes out of guys here that you may not have seen over the past few days. I'm a pretty big fan of going back to Damian Lillard here. Saved what was looking like a pretty awful game with a monster third quarter in that last game where they managed to pull ahead and take that one out by 11. I think both teams actually won by 11 last time. In fairness, the Philly winning by 11 is a massive, massive understatement of the absolute beatdown they put on the Raptors in Game 6. But if you look at Lillard's minutes, with the blowout, he got away with 36 in that game, but we can expect them to increase pretty significantly. If you look at the last 4 games of the Thunder series, he played 37, 37, 41, and 45 minutes in those last 4 games. I have Damian Lillard projected for 45 minutes today. His price is obviously at basically an all-time low for this postseason. Pretty big fan of Lillard. We'll get there when we get there. But again, the minutes allocations that we will see and have seen certainly going to play into our selections today, or at least hopefully should. So again, looking at our former game, these 2 specific, Pacific more accurately, teams coming out there, well, I guess Denver not that close to the Pacific Ocean and not in the Pacific Division, but you know what I'm saying. These 2 Western teams getting out there and playing at 12:30 their body clock times. Getting into a game here, as I alluded to a minute ago, tying up the series 3 apiece. Portland managed to hold home court in Game 6, take down that game by 11. I guess we will start with Nikola Jokic. I boosted him quite a significant number of fantasy points per game from last series to this series and still sold him well short. It is very tough for him to fail. I have seen a number of people saying that they prioritize Kawhi Leonard and that he's their first cash lock and maybe they'll play Jokic. I think that's absolutely ass backwards. If you want to play him for ownership or your lineup construction or you're fading one of the games or because of positions, you're having an easier time getting Kawhi Leonard into your lineups than Nikola Jokic, that's just fine for me. But if it's because he's safer or really any other reason other than saving salary, if saving $1,500 is doing it for you, that's absolutely fine. But It is simply an issue of Jokic also going to play minutes through the roof here, as is Kawhi, although I have him projected for a couple less. But most importantly, the apparatus by which Kawhi Leonard can fail, and I'm using the word fail, a little uniquely in this context, as in not break the slate and not continue to be amazing, is pretty obvious how that can happen. Versus Jokic, he's got to try really hard to fail. He had one game under 57 in this series. I think we can set aside 65-minute, 80 fantasy point game as, okay. But basically every other game he's out there throwing up 60, and it's not surprising. This is a really, really, really poor Portland front court for the purposes of defending a guy who can do everything Jokic does. You cannot slow him down really by doubling him. He just makes the right pass and they still get you. It's really, really hard for him to fail. On DraftKings especially, I have him at $700 more than Kawhi Leonard as a significantly better play. Setting aside, I like the early game a little better for fantasy production, and I think Vegas does have it as an over-under of a few points higher. Setting aside all the rest of that, I think Kawhi Leonard outscores Nikola Jokic maybe a third of the time, and simply the ownership isn't there to justify that. There's obviously a world today where you get 63 out of Kawhi Leonard and 57 out of Nikola Jokic. Neither of these would be shocking circumstances, but alluding to Leonard more specifically in a minute, they have been throwing the kitchen sink at him, and over the last couple games, and one time it worked very well and they took down a W, and the other time it really didn't work that well and he made them pay. But they're really selling out to stop him, and he is running into doubles and the occasional triple out there on the court, and I just find it more likely he struggles and find it less likely that he hits some sort of massive upside relative to what I expect out of Jokic. And Jokic has consistently been underowned. We talk about this. I'll take a look at our projected ownership when I get a second. But I still expect Kawhi to be higher owned, and even on DraftKings. And for me, that's crazy. It's just not how it projects out for me. I like Kawhi Leonard a lot. He's gonna play a lot of minutes. I have him projected for 54 fantasy points. Nothing wrong with you playing any amount of Kawhi Leonard. On FanDuel, the price is a little tougher, though still extremely reasonable, and comes at a position with a paucity of viable options to take instead of him. And I imagine most good lineup builds on FanDuel have them both. It's not a necessity. You can fade one or the other. But, for me, Nikola Jokic still holding on heads and shoulders over these other guys. I do think the Kawhi Leonard situation is something to build around to a certain extent. If you're building one lineup, obviously there's any number of middling circumstances here, so dividing this into the binary of does he get there or does he not is a little bit reductive, to say the least. But Kawhi has not made a three-pointer since Game 4. And this, by the way, should be encouraging for you. He hasn't made a three-pointer since Game 4. There was a blowout in there resulting in limited minutes. And again, the blowout, they kept the Toronto starters in there too long in Game 6. I and a number of other people were out there watching Jonathan Simmons and TJ McConnell drive up the court and get met for several minutes by Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard and Marc Gasol and be like, what are you hoping happens here when they were down? Pulling a number out of my ass here, but like 25 with 8 minutes to go, and they're still out there. It's like, I don't know exactly how you think this is going to work out for you. But again, the minutes out of Kawhi should be really nice. He played 40 in that game. Should have been like 37. But in fairness, due to the Rockets' failure, everybody playing today is playing with 2 full days rest, so 72 hours basically between games. So you're going to see a massive minutes load out of Kawhi Leonard. Now, you're going to see a pretty massive minutes load out of a lot of guys, so that shouldn't necessarily change things. But Kawhi is, I believe, 0 for 4 from 3 each of his last 2 games, and they're just throwing a wall out there in front of him. And I'm a little more inclined, if I'm fading a stud, I'm going to fade Kawhi before I fade Jokic. I'll just say it for the third and final time. it just seems much more likely to me Kawhi fails and a little bit less likely that he hits some sort of massive ceiling. Can he go out there and I'm a superstar guy? Sure, but it's important to note that when you look at his early series success, we'll call it, there was some legendary effective shooting going on there with them not selling out to get him as hard. First 4 games of the series, shot 16 of 23, that's 70%, 13 of 24, that's 55, 13 of 22, that's 60%, 13 of 20, that's 65%. They really, ratcheted up the defensive pressure a little bit. Only took 16 shots in the massive blowout the other way, where he only played 36 minutes. You're going to get 45 minutes of Kawhi, give or take a minute here. He's absolutely fine to go to. If you can come up with the value that you think supports it, I'm fine with playing Kawhi and Jokic, obviously. Again, I have Kawhi projected very, very nicely. And again, this becomes a site-by-site question as far as the positions go, finding enough value to support that sort of designation. So we will get into that a little bit more. But if you're looking to play, Kawhi, the advantage is, he hasn't made a three-pointer in 2 games, and what feels good about that is he hasn't made a three-pointer in 2 games and had 49 and 53 fantasy points in those 2 games. 1 steal and 2 steals, no blocks in either game. Like there is a very real upside there for Kawhi Leonard. So to a certain extent, I'm arguing with myself. But where you're saving money over Jokic, I totally understand doing that. But when I play the games out in my head, it just seems a little more likely that Kawhi gets constantly doubled and is dumping the ball off a little bit. And unlike Jokic, who's basically averaging 10 assists a game, he only averages 4 or 5. He's probably not going to pick up the triple-double with assists. Not impossible, but a little bit less likely. And when you're building on DraftKings, where he's the most popular option, which is the most popular site where we're discussing him most, I suppose. When you play Jokic and Kawhi, you are eschewing a lot of other extremely well-priced options of Damian Lillard and Jimmy Butler and Paul Millsap and CJ McCollum, and there's lots of other guys there who will also play very, very significant minutes and also carry a very large upside for a bit less money. So it's all tough choices. It has often been said that everyone is priced too well on DraftKings and everyone is priced too poorly on FanDuel. That's a little bit of a numerical mirage based on the different salary slots, the lower salary floor, the amount you have to spend per player, and the fact that good and bad as far as how well guys are priced on different sites are relative terms. If everyone is priced badly on FanDuel, then everyone is priced fine, because no one is priced badly. They're all priced evenly. If everyone is priced well on DraftKings, then no one is priced well. Everyone is priced just fine because everyone is priced well. It's there are continuums within themselves, and those statements sort of connote a lack of understanding of exactly how that works. That being said, and me having used my batch of SAT words for the hour, let's go ahead and talk about these players a little more one by one. I am a fan of playing Damian Lillard today. He is going to play, I have him at 45 or 46 minutes, is going to play the majority of the game. I believe the final game versus the Thunder, he didn't set the second half, and that was all of a Game 5. He was going to play a massive amount last game. Finally got a little bit of rest, but he's going to put forward a butt ton of time, and the narrowing of the prices between he and CJ McCollum, where McCollum is $1,800 less on FanDuel, now down to $1,500 less on DK. I still have CJ McCollum as a slightly better point per dollar play on both sides, which has been the case for every game of the series, and in the 6 games so far, been the correct choice 5 of the 6, I think. Lillard deals with 40 minutes or so of Gary Harris trying to get in his shorts, and Gary Harris spent a lot of this year getting healthy. One of my favorite guys, especially last year. Really enjoy his game, especially on the defensive end of the court, obviously. But Yeah, those are the reasons not to play Damian Lillard. The reasons to play him is it's Damian Lillard. The price on DK has now come down to $8,400, and in 46 minutes, it's not like he needs to play brilliantly to smash that. If he scores, I don't know, 1.3 fantasy points a minute, which is a bit above his average. I think on the year he's somewhere in the 1.2, 1.25 range. He ends up with a 60 burger at $8,400. I slightly prefer playing him to playing Jimmy Butler. I have him projected for, several more minutes. And I probably slightly prefer playing him to CJ McCollum because my odds of randomly banging 75 are just proportionally a little higher, and I'm more interested in it for that reason. Now, McCollum saves you $1,500 on DK, eligible 2 positions. On FanDuel, fills a kind of sticky shooting guard spot, and he's still priced fairly well there at $7,600. That's a very equitable price for getting tons of minutes, CJ McCollum, and immediately provides you leverages in you're picking one side of the sort of binary McCollum or Lillard type thing. It doesn't have to be one of those guys. It isn't necessarily either of those guys, and there's games where they both get there and you get 45 out of McCollum and 55 out of Lillard, and you're pretty happy. But generally, I'm a pretty big fan of getting one of those guys for cash, for points per dollar. I do still slightly prefer CJ McCollum. For building my first tournament lineup, I'm a little more happy to see Damian Lillard smiling back at me out of my lineup. So Harkless and Aminu have been bad. They're shooting about 20% from 3 in this series. In the last couple games, they have really started to get the minutes haircut. They have started to go with much more small ball, and you are seeing more Seth Curry, more Rodney Hood, even more Zach Collins in that last game. We'll get to that. And since they've been largely unable to do anything on defense anyway, it's a little more complicated than this. And I guess we're already almost 20 minutes in, so I'll just do the quick version, but it's Jokic and Murray run the offense, and they can't stop Jokic and Murray, and Harkless and Aminu have been ineffective to terrible at guarding their pick and roll, their pick and pop, either of them on Jokic, and so they can't stop them anyway, so we might as well try to outscore them. So Harkless, not really an offensive weapon. Aminu, not really an offensive weapon. Both guys are fine. They're NBA players. They can, at times, make their open threes. Yeah, let's just get them out of there and play Rodney Hood and play Seth Curry and just bomb away and try to outscore them and make some more points because we can't stop them the hell anyway. That's kind of what's going on. And I think the most likely scenario to continue forward today. I'm a fan of also playing either Zach Collins or Enes Kanter. This, again, is a different decision on FanDuel than DraftKings. It's more of a DraftKings distinction I'm talking about here. But I'm a pretty big Zach Collins fan. And in that last game, it's important to notice that he played next to Enes Kanter for, I don't know offhand, I think 12, 15 minutes, somewhere in that range. Some pretty significant amount of time. Let me get that number specifically, or at least make sure that I'm approximating it in about the right neck of the woods. But the fact that he got a ton of time at the 4, closed out that game, looked productive, played well. I'm a pretty big fan of Zach Collins at $4,100. Would you play Enes Kanter when he's not eating food or water? Would you play Kanter during Ramadan when the sun is up? Sure. Would you play Kanter when he's biologically disadvantaged from both his fasting and also the fact that again, as I mentioned previously, I imagine they've pretty well acclimated themselves to local time, but they're also playing in the early game. The answer to all those questions would be yes. I'm a fan of playing Enes Kanter in tournaments. I don't want to play him and Zach Collins. There's some negative, not that you can't, especially at the DK prices where I think it's 5 flat now for Enes Kanter and $4,100 for Zach Collins. I'm a pretty big fan. Enes Kanter, Turkish Muslim, currently observing Ramadan, and so there's been some fun stories about him talking with Hakeem Olajuwon about that, etc., and so on. I'm not super concerned with it, but simply because in whatever time he gets, like, I think he can still hit an upside. I think the ownership will have dropped away pretty significantly. On FanDuel, I would rather throw out my spoon and take the 40 minutes of Marc Gasol and hope he grinds his way to a decent performance. Again, he's going to play a metric butt ton of time, and it doesn't need to be brilliant at that price to get the job done. DK, you're saving $500 off Marc Gasol, whose price went up inexplicably $400, even though he hasn't had what I think we could consider a good game in this series. I think they're all between 20 and 27 fantasy points. But yes, if I saw 20 and 10 again out of Enes Kanter here, I would not be shocked. But I think it's appropriate to be a little trepidatious based on what you will, the fasting, the early game, the lack of minutes in the last game, the clearly re-separated shoulder, the defensive liability. It's worth the... So again, it's interesting that one of the reasons he stuck on the court was the same reason that I alluded to a minute ago, with the fact that you were seeing Harkless and Aminu played off, and the fact that they just said, all right, we're going to score as many points as possible. And whatever you may think of Zach Collins and to a lesser extent Myers Leonard, they're not the offensive players, certainly, or rebounders, which is pretty critical, that Enes Kanter is. So, his minutes have stayed higher than I thought they would be. This was certainly a spot where I was worried he'd be played off the court in the series, and that largely hasn't been the case. Game 6, I think, was his lightest minutes load of the series, and he still got out there and played 29 minutes, as did Zach Collins, by the way. They both played 29 minutes, so that means they spent at least 10 minutes on the court next to each other. But yeah, generally, I like Zach Collins quite a bit on DK, and I don't think he's out of play on FanDuel. Now, he had, I think it was 6 stocks in Game 6. So, I have him coming in well under the 38, I think he ended up with on FanDuel, and 33 he ended up with on DK, because that's really not, a likely to repeat phenomenon. But other than that, he had a perfectly solid game. I have him projected for a little over 20 fantasy points. I'm not shocked if he sees 20 minutes. I'm not shocked if he sees 30 minutes. This could obviously go a lot of ways. But I'm generally a fan on DK. I kind of like having Kanter or Collins in there. They both do have a really significant upside relative to their price. And taking a first glance at our ownership, I don't think either should carry significant digits. We have Kanter. This currently says Enes Kanter at 37%. I'm going to take the under on that. I don't think that is actually likely for a number from him. I think you'll see him in the mid-20s. And Zach Collins at 19%. I imagine that's about right. So I am a fan there. On the opposite side of the ball, I think that it is more likely for me, based on reading between the lines in Malone's comments, how the series has been going, and the basic ability to read a box score, that Torrey Craig gets more towards 30 minutes than towards 20 minutes in this game. I like Torrey Craig a lot at $3,300. There is a real floor there. He's not a player who's going to take more than about a half dozen shots in a game for you, maybe 10 if you're lucky. But he'll pick up some rebounds. He's a good rebounder, some defensive stats, and I just think it's a little more likely they go there. The offensive production can flow out of great Millsap matchup again, and Millsap, again, not to pat myself on the back for the 13th time, but okay, why not one more? From the very start of the series, before Game 1, I was like, he's been dreadful in the Spurs series. I have him much, much better here, and I undersold him. In the Spurs series, I had him at 26 or 27 fantasy points a game, and he didn't get there. Very, very bad spot. At the start of the series, I had him at 33 or 34, and he's well exceeded that, and a lot has to do with, how well he's played, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that, again, this is a Portland frontcourt that just isn't the hell going to stop anyone. So, But for all those reasons, and because you have Murray, who also, by the way, is going to play 45, 46 minutes, and you have Jokic, who's going to play 45, 46 minutes, and you have Millsap, who's going to play 45, 46 minutes, and Harris is not complete dead weight offensively, you don't want Will Barton out there. You want Torrey Craig out there. And I'm pretty sure he had a nasty plus-minus in that last game, which most coaches at least, give lip service to or took an eye at it. Yeah, so Denver lost that last game by 11. Again, here's the plus-minus for some key players in this game. Actually, they only played 9 guys. Here are the 9 guys plus-minuses. Ready? Monty Morris, -7. Malik Beasley, -3. Mason Plumlee, -10. Torrey Craig, +1. Positive plus-minus. One of 2 plus-minus positives on the team. Paul Millsap, +1. He was the other one. Those 2 guys, even though they lost by 11, and Torrey Craig played 27 minutes, Paul Millsap played 39 minutes and was a +1, meaning the 9 minutes they sat Paul Millsap, they lost by 12. Something worth pointing out. Gary Harris, -3. Jamal Murray, -4. Nikola Jokic, -5. Will Barton, -25. In his 26 minutes. They lost by 25 in the 26 minutes he played. They won by 14 in the 22 minutes that he sat on the bench. For all these reasons, the ownership makes it interesting choosing Barton or Hood in GPPs. That's sort of a tough question for me. And I do think that he is in there as functionally what's basically the 7th man in this rotation. Craig will start. They'll run the same 5 starters. You're going to see almost certainly Barton, although his ass playing 12 minutes wouldn't shock me. Plumlee playing not a pile of minutes. He is going to back up Millsap and Jokic, and that is your Plumlee time. So 10 minutes? I'm a little concerned about it. I'm not shocked if you see 44 minutes out of Jokic and 42 minutes out of Millsap here, and that would leave exactly 10 minutes that'd be 4 and 6. That'd leave 10 minutes exactly for Mason Plumlee. So I have some concern there. Not out of play where he's wicked cheap and can score 20 in 10 minutes, but definitely not over, say, Zach Collins today. Malik Beasley played only 10 minutes in this last game. Could end up with some more Beasley over Barton. Could end up with neither of them as they just ride those other 6 guys into the sunset. But Beasley was very, very bad in that last game. Played 10 minutes, shot 0 for 8 from the field. And if you're Malik Beasley and you're not making any buckets, you're not doing a ton for the team. Though, again, it should be mentioned, his 10 minutes, he was -3. Barton's 26 minutes, he was -25. He shouldn't be out there. It's one of those things where I usually assume front offices and staff or trainers or coaches or whatever know something that I don't, because these guys are paid millions of dollars or significant amounts of money to do this for a living, and I'm some asshole sitting in his basement with a webcam. But yeah, Will Barton should not have been getting. I mean, that's great. He got hot and made some shots. You have a number of guys who can get hot and make some shots, and some of them can also play better than average defense. Will Barton is well smaller than I am. Dude can't be out there getting bullied around. I think he's been a real issue. It's sort of like matching up Marc Gasol's minutes with Joel Embiid a little closer. He's like the whole reason you got the guy. Forget being prideful or stubborn or obdurate and sticking with your exact rotations. Get that one guy you have who can possibly stop that guy. By the way, speaking of insane box scores and Will Barton's -25 and insane plus minuses, and talking about Joel Embiid and Marc Gasol, it's been fun for me over the last couple days to hear alternatingly that Embiid has been really, really good or really bad. So in Game 6, Joel Embiid played 35 and a half minutes. I think it was 35-33 exactly. Shot 5 for 14 from the field. Had 17 points, 12 rebounds, an assist, a steal, 2 blocks, 5 turnovers for 39 and a half DraftKings points in 35 and a half minutes. So fantasy, you're not excited about that at $8,700 or $8,900 or $9,000. He was a +40. When Joel Embiid played in that game, they won 100-60. In the series, he is +133. and they've been outscored in the series. If you look only at the time Joel Embiid is on the court, they're winning every game by, let's see, that's he's plus 133 in the series, and they've played 6 games. So if they look at just the time Embiid's on the court, which is 3/4 of a game, they're averaging up plus 22. Throw another 7 on that, pulling a third of that. So they're winning every game by 30 if he's the only one on the court, and they're losing every game by 40 when he's not on the court. It is an unbelievable disparity between the performance of the 76ers when he's out there. Now, this is related to a couple other things. One of the issues with box score is it gets polluted by who else is on the court, and the 76ers starting 5 is really, 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 really good, which is one reason to have some hope for them today. Again, I picked Toronto in this series. I picked Denver in this series. And they are both favored at home by about a half dozen points today. So just to back my picks, I certainly hope they get there. But, how many minutes do you get out of Joel Embiid today? He played 35 and a half in that last game. And again, it wasn't close. And unlike Nick Nurse, Brett Brown intelligently pulled his starters with quite a bit of time to go. You may get 42 minutes of Joel Embiid today, which A, bodes well for the team, and B, certainly gives him some appeal as a play. Now, this is, again, a horrific matchup for him. I'm assuming not many of you are catching the show for the first time today, so I will not go back over the Gasol, Embiid, Jokic, Cantor spiel that I've done 6 or 7 times now. But it's about as bad as a spot as it can be against Toronto, against Marc Gasol. So, fantasy production again, but he is still a brilliant defender. A lot of people are like, what's wrong with Marc Gasol? He's constantly up against this gigantic dude who is an elite defender. Like, people never understand how good Embiid is defensively. Partially because he makes it look so easy, and he's so cash as opposed to like Rudy Gobert, but he's in there, like Rudy Gobert level defensively as a center. He's brilliant, and he does several things better than Gobert. He covers the 3-point line a little bit better. He's really good. So when people are like, man, why is Marc Gasol doing so bad? Marc Gasol's a good fantasy player. Fantasy point a minute, 1.1 fantasy points a minute. When you're within 3 feet of Joel Embiid the entire game, yeah, it limits your ability to get shots. So, I like Marc Gasol today. Price is still very tolerable. You are not dead if you get 25 for his 5,500 on a 2-game slate where things can certainly muck down a little bit. The pace can come down. If we've watched the series as a whole, the over-unders for the entirety of the playoffs have fallen off a cliff. Like, they're all down a dozen points. The defense has been brilliant. The pace is all way down. This is all apropos of nothing, but just sort of as trivia. If you look at the team's pace in some of these series, several teams in the second round would have qualified for the slowest team in the NBA during the regular season. There's not a lot of transition buckets. This shit has slowed way, way, way down. But yeah. So, I was saying before, and I think I may have interrupted myself talking about Kawhi, but I do think it is, important that if, again, there's obviously middling options here, but if you're not running Kawhi out there, have Pascal Siakam as your first option, have probably Kyle Lowry as your second, have Marc Gasol as your third, or Danny Green as your fourth option to pick up some of those usage and shots. And all those dudes are, again, going to play a lot of time. So, a similar situation with, Joel Embiid. I still am disinclined towards playing him on either side. You could get 40 whatever minutes. That makes me pretty excited. And obviously he can pull 60 out of his bag, and that's certainly going to be good for you. It is a barbaric spot for him. There's really no better way to put it. If you look at his, we're not dealing with the tiniest of sample sizes now. If you look at his fantasy production in this series, which again, just reading out game logs is not high science, but I think it's worth taking a second to do so. We are 6 games into this series. The first game of this series. Let me get my columns all lined up here and make sure I'm looking at this right. Okay. The first game of this series, he played 30 minutes and had 30 fantasy points. The second game of this series, he played 32 minutes and had 26 fantasy points. The third game of the series, he played 28 minutes and had 62 fantasy points. And that's what you're looking for. Now, you had I'll just leave it as it was. That was obviously an incredible performance out of him and shows that there's certainly an evident ceiling. Fourth game, 35 minutes, 38.5 fantasy points. Fifth game, 31 minutes, 23 fantasy points. This game that just occurred, 35.5 minutes, 39.5 fantasy points. If you ignore, and again, this is obviously cherry picking, but if you ignore the one game where he was good, in the other 5 full games, he's averaging like 0.9 fantasy points a minute. And this is a guy who, during the regular season is at 1.65 or some fairly insane goddamn number. And his production per minute will generally come down when he gets more and more time. So, I'm just fine with Joel Embiid in tournaments, but on FanDuel, you're playing close to Jokic prices, and you're playing him over Jokic, and I have him projected for literally 15 fantasy points less. On DraftKings, you're playing him over Millsap and McCollum, or Pascal, or Kawhi, or Lillard, or just guys who aren't in a dreadful goddamn spot. And there are just more people to carry the load on this team. Again, this is an all-time brilliant starting 5 because everybody can get it done. It's rare that Joel Embiid going in roughly the hardest matchup for him in the entire league is the way that a lot of the usage is going to go. So I am in a single lineup still pretty disinclined to playing Joel Embiid. On FanDuel, I'm playing him over Jokic. That doesn't make sense to me. On DraftKings, I'm playing him over lots and lots of underpriced dudes who, like I have Joel Embiid projected for 4 more fantasy points than Paul Millsap, who costs $3,000 less and is still, again, criminally underpriced on DraftKings. But let me continue to move through my notes. I don't want to miss anything, and then I will burn out questions again. If you are a member at awesemo.com, go ahead and just send them in the premium Slack, and I will get to them. If you are not yet, first of all, what are you waiting for? Second of all, go ahead and send me a tweet, and we will get to your questions. Talked about that. Yeah, as far as starting lineup changes go, I'm not shocked to see either Zach Collins or Rodney Hood start this game. I don't think it's likely, but 20% or something, they make an adjustment there, would not radically change my amortization of those players. Rodney Hood's been really consistent. Now, you can certainly make an argument the upside is limited. He does not do a whole lot but score. Put mildly. Assuming Mike Malone pulls his head out of his butt a little bit, you get more Craig and, less of Barton. That limits his opportunities. I mean, that matchup has been a pretty key one. Rodney Hood is 6'8" and long, I want to say. Again, Barton is my size, except he weighs 20 pounds less than me. He's a skinny dude. So, I think that could cause you to come off that. I'm not sure how high the ceiling is because, again, he's out there sharing the court with basically Lillard and McCollum the entire game. They're better and better options, and he doesn't do a lot but score. Again, if you look at that last game, I think he got over 30 for maybe the second time in the series. There's obviously the overtime game, although he only played 27 minutes or whatever in that, but he ended up 8 for 12 from the field, and I think had points, 4 rebounds, and nothing. And that's just what the guy does. And he's going to be kind of popular, so in a vacuum, I'm a little more inclined to play Zach Collins. I'm a little more inclined to play other guys. But we obviously have a very limited sample of value guys. I'm not going to get on anyone for playing their Rodney Hood today, especially on FanDuel, where $4,800 is cheaper than $4,800 on DraftKings. Another shout out for Serge Ibaka. He fouled out of that last game. Not a brilliant matchup for him. But I do think they lean on their core players a little bit more there. The starting lineups for Denver and Portland are the same. Okay, there you go. Answers that question. Which, again, I was pretty sure was the more likely scenario. So Ibaka had that one big game in Game 5 where he got extra time and was productive with it. He fouled out in Game 6 in 21 or 22 minutes. I want to say he played 13 minutes and a little change in the first half. He had played 32 minutes in Game 5, but that was partially due to the returning gimpy Pascal Siakam, who I presume after, again, a full 72 hours off additionally is completely off his injury. I think they want him to play as much as possible, so you're getting 40 out of Pascal Siakam. But they're going to run pretty close to a 7-man rotation there. So all of your Fred VanVleets and Norman Powells come with extreme risk to me. You need a blowout probably for those guys to get home. But Serge Ibaka, I had him in, with the Siakam game I'm referring to, I had him at 28 minutes. Again, he fouled out. Now I have that number down to 26. But on DraftKings, $3,900 Serge Ibaka in 26 minutes, that still feels pretty good. And again, he does plenty when he's out on the court. He's not out of play on FanDuel, nor is Zach Collins. 4,600 on FanDuel makes some sense. And again, he's a guy who can pick up a few blocks and, get you to 28, 30 fantasy points in that limited time. So I still like Serge Ibaka cautiously. And again, there's one of the value plays on DK. I'm pretty sure we'll see time. Should talk about Malik Beasley a little more. Again, he got 10 minutes in that last game. Beasley over Barton would not shock me here. He's certainly a better defensive player. He's not a good defensive player, but he's better than Barton. So if you're getting torched, I can see him going back to 18 minutes instead of the 10 he got in that game. He's priced at 2,800, 2,900, I think. That's a little more playable for me than some of these other guys. A couple other value considerations. Was happy that I got Mike Scott right. So Brett Brown publicly asked the press, I don't know who our 8th guy is. They're really trying to find an 8th guy for this rotation to do something for this team. They have the Super 5 starters. They have James Ennis, who's playing fairly well in his 20 to 26 minutes. Not a ton of ceiling there, but certainly for cash value, his time seems absolutely locked in. They have Mike Scott, who was injured for a while and came back and played 12 minutes and then played 13 minutes. And I said, just eye testing this game. He really looks to be the player who seems most comfortable out there. Now, he's not, I don't know how to say this very well. He's not playing well. His plus minus is consistently negative. You don't want to throw tons of time at him. But after those 14 and 13 minute games, he played 18 and then 20. There's a chance they just fold this into a 7-man rotation and just run billions of minutes out of people here. Someone asked me, how Mike Scott does at center. It's worth pointing out that Mike Scott's center minutes are really Ben Simmons' center minutes. And, Butler runs the point, Mike Scott runs the 4, and really Ben Simmons plays center for most of those minutes. Not a particularly relevant distinction, but someone was talking about why doesn't Gasol dominate him, and there's lots of switching and stuff going on here. While Gasol, guards Embiid almost exclusively, Embiid actually has been guarding more of Pascal Siakam, which has in theory limited him a little bit, which has put Tobias Harris on Marc Gasol. And one of the things I've been disappointed by is in the significant amount of time that Gasol gets guarded by Tobias Harris, he hasn't made more hay with it, and that's one of the reasons they can stick with it. Again, if I'm coaching that team, I try to dump it down to Marc Gasol and let him to establish the post. Then you've got to pull Tobias Harris, who is not a great defender to begin with. He's below average, and throw him back somewhere else. If you throw him back on Pascal, he's obviously a guy who can create by himself. So I'm surprised they haven't... this entire series, many of the bad matchups haven't been abused as much as I expect them. They have not made a concerted effort to play J.J. Redick off the floor. Just we're going to play that dude off the floor. You've got to play more James Ennis, who is just not nearly the three-point threat he is. We're just going to play Redick off the floor and switch him until we just beat him to death. That hasn't happened as much, nor has, Gasol working that matchup. And I'm not entirely sure why. Let me get into some questions, because we are at 15 minutes left, and I feel like I've talked about just about everyone. So going back to about when we got started, how many minutes do you think Pascal plays? I think I have him at 43. Can play a lot of minutes. Why would you play Cantor when he's not eating food and can't drink water? a little more complicated than that, and you could actually make an argument that based on the fact this game is at 12:30, he can, before sunrise, eat food and drink water. You don't not eat for several weeks. So as opposed to when he has a night game where he has not imbibed in some 12 or 14 hours, he ate 5 or 6 hours ago. So he's better today than he would have been in the past. But you play him because regardless of the eating and drinking thing, dude can still get 40 and is going to be, in my opinion, pretty lower than we have him projected for. Collins or Ibaka on DK if you already have Kenner. At that point, I'm going to play Ibaka. You always feel like you're getting too much Denver. That's fair. How do you feel about Craig, Barton, Beasley as values in DK cash? Not all in one lineup, but maybe a couple. I don't think you can play Beasley in cash. The minutes are simply absent. I would be most happy of those guys at their price in cash of playing Torrey Craig. Plumlee or Scott on DK, I would play Mike Scott at this point. I think Mike Scott plays 20, 22 minutes. I think Mason Plumlee plays 10. Yahoo cash, Gary Harris and Ibaka or Marc Gasol and Danny Green. That's pretty close for me. We're running out of time, so I'm just going to go with a no take on that one, but that's very close. If you have Kawhi, probably Harris and Ibaka. If you don't, probably Gasol and Green. But again, it's cash, and those project within a point of each other. I'd have to look it up, and I'm going to save the time. Yahoo GPP, Hood, Craig, Ennis, or Barton. I've gone back and forth on this all day. You're just hunting upside there. I'm probably playing Will Barton. He projects worse for me than almost all those other guys. But it's odd that he has the greatest chance of those 4 players, probably of not getting 15, and also has the greatest chance of getting 40. Just how that is. How many points do you have for Embiid and Gasol going for tonight? I have Joel Embiid at about 45. I have Marc Gasol at about 28. I do think Marc Gasol has underperformed. That would be his best performance in the series by 1 or 2 or 3 over several of his other games. But again, the minutes are going to push up for all these guys. What do you guys think? Ennis or Barton? I'll let the community answer that as a whole. Do I think Craig gets more fantasy points than Barton straight up? No, I have Barton projected for a couple more. I have Torrey Craig projected for about 19 and Barton for about 21. But again, yeah, you're making some minutes guesses there, but I just do think that the Craig minutes trend up a little more. I do think you get closer to 30 than 20 out of him here. Do I like Pascal projection on his minutes? I love Pascal. Can you go over Ennis versus Redick, especially how you see the minutes playing out? I have to take Redick. I think the floor is lower. I think the ceiling is higher, and they have not made a concerted effort to play his ass off the floor. So I think the minutes stick with him. I'm going to go that way. Could you touch on and rank Simmons, Tobias, and Jimmy on DK? Yeah, sure. And again, your prices are all over the place. You got 67 on Simmons, 62 on Tobias, 79 on DraftKings. From the beginning of the series, we talked about that this would probably flow into Jimmy's hands just because we expected Kawhi to significantly guard Simmons. I haven't read or seen anything making me think that they are going to make wholesale changes and all of a sudden you will have, for example, Kawhi guarding Jimmy Butler. I've heard people suggest that. I wouldn't do it. And I don't think they will do it because they are trying to slow this shit down. And as has been stated, Ben Simmons is average in the half court. And is incredibly good moving. He is underrated as a player because of his struggles and the fact he can't shoot and just like people like to shit all over him. He's LeBron in the open court. Or very close. He is in that LeBron, Magic Johnson, he's obviously not as refined as those guys. He's not as good as those guys yet. But leading a break, Ben Simmons is something very, very special. And so they go, we're just going to stick you with, one of the best defensive players in the world. That slows that shit the hell down. So I don't think they can let that go. There's just a chance they get boat raced. So I assume they still do it that way. Simmons had his best game of the series and got 40 last game. That's still not super exciting the way everybody's priced on DK. I still have him well last. Jimmy is your cash option. I do think I still have Jimmy projected for the range of 50. I still like Tobias Harris a little more than him if I'm playing one tournament lineup because, again, 20, 25 shots is not out of the realm of possibility. Massive upside as well, not out of the realm of possibility. Would you rather build around Jokic or Kawhi for a single lineup for Yahoo Cash? Jokic. Do I like Scott or Ennis straight up? I will stick with Ennis, but Scott, your ownership's going to be a little better. Kristaps Porzingis is shoving prostitutes around the street. Green, Aminu, or Ennis on DK? If I have Kawhi, Ennis. If I do not, Danny Green probably. Is fading Jokic an absolute disaster? No. It's much more tolerable on DraftKings where you are just counting on other dudes to get just a better freaking ratio. So if you don't have to suck down the 10-2 for Jokic, whose price came down for some reason, let's assume you think he gets 55, you're not dead in the water. On FanDuel, like you need something special to happen out of like Embiid, and at that point I think you almost have to play Embiid because I don't think you get 40 plus out of Marc Gasol and his Cantor or whatever. It's possible. You can run on his Cantor and try to get there in a tournament. FanDuel, it's a really tough fade. DK, no. You just need all your 6K and 7K guys who you can now play 6 of instead of 4 to go the hell off, and him to give you 53 instead of 71. So is it a disaster? No. I would rather play him than fade him because this entire series, his ownership has been lower than it should be. You had 72% Kawhi, 53% Nikola Jokic. That's just wrong. And Jokic has 6 games this series and has 57 or more in 5 of them. JJ Redick breaks the slate. Unlikely, but not impossible. Dude can shoot. You can make 8 of his 10 3-pointers, and yeah, JJ Redick could break the slate. Craig Harris, Millsap, okay, one DK line. I think the DK line I'm toying with has Murray, Millsap, Jokic in it, so certainly Craig Harris, Millsap is okay. Scott or Ennis, DK, GPP, I will still stick with Ennis most of the time. Mike Scott, I like quite a bit. Again, $3,100 goddamn dollars. But a little more comfortable with Ennis. DK Cash, Gasol and Hood or Cantor and Harris. Can't play Cantor and Cash. Acceptable to completely punt one spot on FanDuel. Yes, it is acceptable. Obviously, you are now losing the flexibility and advantage of one of my guys can fail. Like if you run out... By the way, you have, is it acceptable to completely punt one spot, Curry, Powell, etc. Curry and Powell are different classes of players here. Curry I have projected for 21 minutes. He could play 25 minutes. Curry I have projected for 16 fantasy points. He could score 28 or 30. Norman Powell is going to play 8 minutes. And almost certainly is dead water. So just for reference, your example choices of Seth Curry and Norman Powell are drastically different classes of players today. So between those two guys, I'm much, much happier playing Seth Curry. Tobias Harris or Millsap on DraftKings already playing Jokic. Personal decision. In a tournament already having Jokic, I'm a little happier playing Tobias Harris. I have Paul Millsap projected for, I believe, 7.5 fantasy points more. He's been great. The matchup is great. The more they take Aminu and Harkless off the court, which is what I expect to continue to happen, the better his matchup gets. It's a tough fade, brother. But in a tournament lineup, I already have Jokic. You know, maybe I throw a Mason Plumlee punt out there, hope for some foul trouble, and run Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris or Millsap on DK, we just did that. Thoughts on punting Harkless or Aminu? I would rather punt Aminu between the two of them because of Hood's increased status in the lineup, the difficulty of those two playing against each other, slightly better shooting, touch, peripherals, etc. So I don't want to do it. If I do it, I would do it with Aminu. But I think them being expurgated from the lineup proper will continue thusly. Questions on the YouTube for 3 minutes. Kawhi and Jokic together. Two great tastes that taste great together. Did you get your peanut butter in my chocolate? Or did I get my chocolate in your peanut butter? Favorite 3K and under play on DK? I'm not going to look, but I'm 99% sure it would be Malik Beasley. Cantor or Gasol, DK GPP? Depends on a lot of other things. In general, if I kind of want to play Cantor or Zach Collins. So if I don't have Zach Collins, probably Cantor. So, you know, Cantor and Ibaka or Zach Collins and Gasol, I think is a fun way I sort of pair through it. If you had to play Kawhi or Jokic, who would you fade? Someone didn't watch the start of the show. I would fade Kawhi if I have to fade one of those two players. You said FanDuel GPP. That makes it a little more complicated. There's more merit to going with fading Jokic there, but I would still rather fade Kawhi. But on FanDuel, it is a closer question. How many guys would you have from the first game in one FanDuel GPP lineup? I built one FanDuel GPP lineup. It has A lot of guys from the first game. 7. Now, that is on the high side. If I built 100 FanDuel GPP lineups, I imagine that number would be more frequently 6. But more. And again, that just becomes of, some of the value plays where if you're punting Curry or Beasley, you can get away with those guys at around those prices. When I started this earlier today, I think it was about 5. But the one I have in front of me is 7. So to answer your question, that's where I'm sitting at. Do you like Redick today? I think he's fine. I think his upside, floor, salary, expected ownership are all about where they should be, so I'm fine. Thoughts on Danny Green? I'm a little more back on Danny Green again. The ownership will have come down. I would rather play Danny Green than Rodney Hood in a lot of lineups. Danny Green's going to play 40 whatever the hell minutes. It doesn't need to do great to get 30 or something. I imagine Danny Green for... and here we go, trying to go 100% on Danny Green in this series. I think I like Danny Green again today. I would probably rather run Danny Green in most lineups than Barton or Hood, for example. This is a ton of minutes. It's site dependent and a couple other things. But generally, yes, I do like Danny Green today. GPP, McCollum and Butler, Tobias and Dame. I am slightly inclined. I mean, the first one is a better cash lineup significantly. Not that significantly, but I have Butler and McCollum both as great points per dollar plays. Both can be higher owned, both very nice. Tournaments, I would rather pivot a little bit towards Tobias and Dame. Favorite point guard to pair with Lillard on FanDuel? Jamal Murray, question mark. Don't really have a favorite there. If you're going to punt it, you go with Seth Curry. I'm fine with Murray, who, again, it should be pointed out, is over 40 fantasy points for 3 or 4 games in a row. There's a 50-burger in there, has been playing really well. The shot totals are really up. I like Jamal Murray. So Jamal Murray, feel more comfortable with than Kyle Lowry. Be very close for me if I did not have Kawhi in the aforementioned lineup. Redick or Collins or Barton and Aminu on FanDuel and a GPP. Redick and Collins. Barton and Aminu, you're asking for a couple different special things to happen there. Okay, I'm going in the tank. All questions answered, by the way, from both chat and going back and looking again. Best sub 4K play, Ibaka and Craig on DK. I would agree with that. Yeah, Danny going to play. I think Danny is underrated at this point through the blowouts and everything else. The number of minutes that he could lay down is getting undersold. So, you could get 43 minutes of Danny here. So, yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of Danny Green today, or at least just relative to his ownership, where he should be and where he will be. I guess we'll do a quick overlay check. Not a ton, a little bit on DK. There's a couple tournaments that are 75% filled now. That'll be, I don't think anything will overlay, but there's definitely a real chance that some stuff will not fill on DraftKings. A couple single entries still look a little bit appealing, so certainly something to think about there. Right there. Some satellites underfilled, as is always the case. I think we have seen no news on the Twitter sphere, really. Note didn't talk specifically a ton about Showdown. That is a very reasonable point. Not going to try in the 30 seconds before lock, unfortunately. Sorry. But yeah, coming down to it now. Yeah, this is our final multi-game day until Summer League if you count it, or October if you don't. We are locked. Let us see what we have for some ownership. Let's head over to FanDuel first. I think they had another 555 on DK today. I don't recall what it was on FanDuel. Just got a question. Murray, Ibaka, or Dame Scott on FanDuel? That's fairly close for me. Again, we're past lock, so obviously whatever answer I give isn't going to be terribly useful for you. Yeah, it's really close for me. Probably because of the way FanDuel works and with the drop, I'd probably Lillard Scott a little more often. But that's close. All right, some FanDuel ownerships. Nikola Jokic, 39%. I give up. That's it. I'm leaving. We're done for the year. Close it down, boys. We're going home. fictional characters. Okay. Just gonna press on in the dark, dismal world that is Jokic being 39% owned on FanDuel. Yeah, you're just wrong. Like, I love y'all, but you're just wrong, especially on FanDuel, where you get to drop a value. I can't imagine anyone has anyone projected higher than him if they have a third grade educator. Like, I don't understand how the highest scoring player, like, if he costs 13K, I think then maybe like 40% ownership would be right. But he's 39.3% owned. That's insane. That's absolute rubbish. I'm agog. I am aghast. But anyhow, okay. Clicked on a lineup. It had Jokic, much less than. Okay, sorry. I'm coming back to life now, but I don't know. Like, his average game for this series is whatever 50. Ignoring quad overtime 80 burger. We'll ignore that and do you a favor, which you should. That's obviously a massive statistical improbability. Although, it's not unreal. You should give him... He had 60 at the end of regulation. And getting one overtime in 6 games of a series isn't crazy. And he had like 67 after one overtime. So let's call it a 67-point game. He's averaged like 58 a game per 6 games this series over the last couple weeks. It's not like you're going back into distant history. It's like, I don't... What do you have the other centers projected at? You think you get... Well, round... let's say you get 30 out of Canner, round him up. Let's say you expect to get 30 out of Gasol. We'll round him up a little bit. Let's round Jokic up or let's round Embiid up and say you get 50 out of him. What do you project? It's people are just gonna be Jokic is just gonna be 35% on, but that's still a little crackerjack for me. But anyway, okay, I'm coming back to it now. Seth Curry 17%, Jamal Murray 54%, CJ McCollum 41%, Malik Beasley 7%. Let me find some Lillard in my life. Lillard 32%. That feels pretty good at 9,400 on FanDuel. Again, Jamal Murray is 8,500. He's 54% owned. Damian Lillard is 9,400. He's 32% owned. Feels pretty good. Zach Collins, 35% owned at $5,300. What one game will do for you? Will Barton, 23%. That number has fallen off nicely. Paul Millsap, 35 at $8,100. He should be 60 on DK. Evan Turner, 8%. I don't know. Al-Farouq Aminu, 18. I guess he's cheaper than Zach Collins now. That happened in a hurry. Anthony Simmons at 0.1%. I didn't expect to see that name. Alright, going to DK before I tire of clicking on lineups. Let's see. There was a 555 again, right? Am I correctly remembering such a thing? Yes. Yes! Ewing! In the $555,000 tournament. Jokic's price came down after putting up, another 60 burger, and his ownership came down too, because lobster. I guess the value is worse, and there is a relationship between those two things. Paul Millsap, what did I say? He should be 60% on DK? 59. I missed it by 1. Jamal Murray, 58.5. Yeah. Nikola Jokic, 46.7. That's less egregious. Zach Collins, 40. That happened fast. Torrey Craig, 34. Credit to the internet for doing a good job there. CJ McCollum, 33.6. Tobias Harris, 33. Damian Lillard, 29. That's 29%, $8,400 Damian Lillard. I'm pretty excited about that. And yeah, 4% under McCollum. So yeah, I'm a fan of Lillard in tournaments, but mildly. Will Barton, 23. I don't know. Enes Kanter, 23. Okay. Rodney Hood, 22. Al Farouk, I am in you, 13. Seth Curry, 9. Mason Plumlee, 7. Evan Turner, 6. Mo Harkless, 5. Malik Beasley, 4.5. Myers Leonard, 1. Monty Morris, who played 2 minutes last game, I should point out, 0.5. Isaiah Thomas, 0.03. And you cannot play yourself for all players in this game are active. There we are, my friends. I've had a conversation with the higher-ups, my bettors, on at Osmo.com, and I will continue doing shows for almost every showdown slate leading forward for the rest of the postseason. So we will keep doing this. I think these shows are going to end up being a little bit shorter, as they are probably going to be 45 minutes or some such, but I'll probably go on before most days remaining in the postseason with about 45 minutes for a lock. Still tinkering with the idea of actually hopping a plane and spending the 10 days out in Vegas for Vegas Summer League, do some in-person reporting there, get credentialed, ask the players the tough questions. That'd be kind of fun. Anyhow, that is it, my friend. So, thank you as always. Been my pleasure. Again, happy Mother's Day. Reach out to the moms in your life. Give them the love they so richly deserve. And, take it all down today. Get that money. Best of luck. And